personal YouTube. I want to see if this works better because that way I can respond to questions or like
Okay.
comments.
Yeah, that's right. I better get.
But I want to make sure. So it's setting it up right now. I want to make sure that like it doesn't give feedback.
Okay.
Oh, so now we're streaming. So this is the awkward part I didn't know.
Okay. Awesome.
Uh, okay, I just had to mute mine, so we're good to go. It is streaming, so we'll give people
Little
a
time.
little bit of your singing as we welcome them in.
Oh my goodness.
Can you hear it?
I can hear it.
All right, good. So I was on a video with Investopedia, and Caleb Silver asked us, Brittany Castro and I did it, and he asked us if we had any walk-up music. And I
Oh my
never
God.
thought about walk-up music for a video conference, but I thought that was so cool. So I was like, I want to try to do that as much as I can. So
I love that. That'll bring your musical component to this work,
right.
bring in your own style.
So for everybody joining now, that beautiful voice you hear in the background is our guest, Ninamarie Jeffrey. She is not only a branding and content marketer, but she's also an artist. So I thought we would welcome everybody with some Coldplay cover that she did.
Thank you, Justin.
All right, we'll let it go for another few seconds and get some more people in here, and then we'll dive in at the top of the hour and be punctual.
Awesome.
And obviously, I will link to the YouTube channel in the show notes.
Awesome. I was just telling Justin that I am slacking for my own content, and I will be putting up more videos soon. So I always try to give enough time to my music as well.
All right, so it's 1 o'clock, so we'll pause you and we'll let you bring us out as well on the
Awesome.
on the back end of it. So it is 1 o'clock Eastern on Friday, so that means it is time for another episode of the Advisor of Tomorrow podcast live, and this is actually a bonus session. I told you last week we were going to go every other week, but I got connected with Ninamarie and wanted to have her come on. I told her last night when we were talking that I like to try to find people on the come up. So before they get huge and before everybody knows them, I want to brag about having them on my podcast or on my videos beforehand. So I didn't want to wait, because if you've been on Twitter lately, you're starting to see Ninamarie out there a lot more engaging, especially in the FinTwit community. So she's not exclusively with advisors, but she's showing herself there more. And I wanted to be one of the first to welcome her to the FinTwit community and have her on the podcast. So Ninamarie, thank you for joining us. And real quick, before we get into our conversation, again, for if you're tuning in, it's the importance of a thoughtful brand narrative. And there's a lot of things we're going to cover in this, but real quick, give everybody your backstory, kind of how you got into marketing and content, and a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I got my start in marketing, working actually in luxury real estate. I was working for a developer who has properties all over the world, and they needed someone to take on their social media marketing. And I was already on their marketing team doing other digital things. And they're like, hey, you're young. Do you know anything about social media? And I was like, well, I mean, I do. So I just started learning, and that was where I really kind of took off in terms of self-education, really just learning everything there was on how to take a brand from not having a social media presence really, and not really being established in terms of having a brand story and having kind of a unique voice on social, to having that strategy laid out in place and then having a strategy and implementing it, and really in community building. So that's kind of where I got my start. I was doing social media marketing, running that for them. And eventually I was like, wow, maybe I want to branch out on my own. I'm a singer. I'd love to take my work and be remote. And it's easier for gigs. And I just started opening it up, and here I am.
So you have a website called The Content Ally. And again, like always, I'll link to everything we mentioned down below, but that's kind of where people can reach out and learn more about you as the business professional. We're going to hit the musician at the very end. But on your website, The Content Alley, there was a statement that I really liked, and I kind of want to use that to kick us off. So I'm actually going to read it. This is from your website. It says, I believe in the power of thoughtful brand narrative and content marketing strategy to boost the performance and credibility of any brand on social media. I really, that's a strong statement. What is it about the brand narrative? Kind of what led you to forming that opinion and that strong belief?
Well, really, it's all about storytelling. And I know that might sound cliche, but what really led me to this is realizing the best companies out there, the best brands that I was feeling most drawn to, they were telling stories. And I realized that there are a lot of industries out there on social that still aren't comfortable telling a story. They're more hiding behind kind of a corporate facade, or everything's so cookie cutter and so clean and perfect, and there's no emotion there. And especially as an artist, I was really drawn to, how do we communicate the human side of every company? What are the emotions behind why people are doing what they do? Because that's what I'm seeing really resonates with people on social. So I really believe in that, a strong brand narrative, and then communicating that with all the content that you do. That's going to speak to your audience, and that's what social is about. And also, that's what drives business. When people want to work with you, you, they'll be engaging.
I'm gonna have you define brand narrative in
Yeah.
a minute, but if you're watching, I have a t-shirt. I'm lame. I like to make my own t-shirts sometimes. So this is like one of two shirts, but it says brand enthusiast.
Love it.
And I have, as I look back on my life, I've always been drawn to brands, and it is the storytelling. So growing up, Michael Jordan was my favorite basketball player. So I was a Nike kid through and through. And even if I had other, let's say the team shoes were Adidas, like I'm the type of person that doesn't like to mishmatch brands. So I won't have Nike shoes on with an Adidas shirt, or if I
You
do,
are
it's
a
very
loyalist.
limited. I can't do it. And it's weird, like, but not everybody's brain operates that way, but mine does. And I really do buy into brands. Like I am some brand enthusiasts like myself, you might say are Kool-Aid drinkers. But if you look at the things that I'm really excited about, the brands that I really like, it's a lot of Kool-Aid drinking. Like I have a Peloton, like that's a big community. And there's a lot of, either you're in it or you're out it. CrossFit was a big part of my life with working out, the Nike thing, but then even smaller brands. And I really like finding smaller brands because I'll have you correct me. But I think being a smaller brand, whether that's a smaller advisory firm or a smaller brand, like one of my favorite brands is No Bull, and they are a company that makes CrossFit clothing, shoes. They used to work at Reebok. They went off and did their own thing, but they have a real cool story and a real cool message behind it. And I think that as a smaller company, you have a little bit more of an ability to tell that personal story and build that brand narrative, or maybe you don't have more of an opportunity, but you can go deeper to the personal level. And I really, really am drawn to that. I like those, and I buy into those stories, and I want to support those people or companies. So I buy into the brand. I think that for people who really are drawn to brands like I am, this whole personal branding and brand narrative makes sense. But for those who are on the outside that don't have that in their mind, maybe we need to help educate them more on what it is, how it works, and kind of how they can use that to their advantage. And you've touched on it a little bit. Before we
Hmm.
get to brand narrative,
Yeah.
let's define brand. And do you think there are two types of brands? A brand for a big corporation, the Nike Just Do It type of brand, and then a brand for a smaller firm that's more of the personal narrative? Or is brand, it doesn't matter size, it's how you execute it?
Exactly. I honestly think brand is brand. It doesn't matter how you execute it. I do think there's definitely a difference in terms of execution. Larger companies, bigger corporations, they have more hurdles when it comes to defining an authentic human faced brand. I think that's where, especially smaller RIAs, where advisors can really stand out. You have more flexibility to be authentic and kind of bring a unique message to niche down, over bigger competitors. So I think that same brand is brand. It's who you are. It's what you want to evoke in people. It's your style. It's your vibe, and that's going to be that same definition exists whether you're a huge company or an individual. And in terms of execution, like you were saying, you really do, I think, have a lot more flexibility that you can take advantage of. I think it's a strength to be more nimble when it comes to your social media narrative. You're going to have just less hurdles to jump through when it's you and a small team to communicate, versus a big one like Adidas. Like you were saying, Noble versus, or was it Adidas that they pulled away from, or
They left from Reebok, yeah.
from Reebok?
So
From
same
Reebok,
same size. Mhm.
yeah, same size. They could have a little more spunk, when they left Reebok and do their own thing, and they were able to hone in on their messaging, probably because they had less red tape to go through.
And I think it allows them to have more personality, and you're
Yeah.
right. If you compare No Bull to Reebok, they
Hmm.
are two distinct brands, and No Bull is more edgy because they
Yes,
can afford to be that way.
they can be more.
They don't
Yeah.
have shareholders, they don't have all the
Yeah.
corporate red tape they have to go through. They can just say, hey, this is who we are, this is who we're going to work with, It either resonates with you and it doesn't resonate with you. And that's fine because it's going to build a loyal following, which if
Mhm.
you know anything about Noble, they have a very loyal following. And
Mhm.
then if you don't like them, that's fine. And I think that that's more and more advisors are understanding that it's okay to put your personality out there and let people decide whether or not they're going to like you to want to work with you. Because as an advisor,
Mhm.
we can't work with everybody. So why
Yes.
not try to draw the right people in? I'm curious what your thoughts are. So the way I look at kind of brand, at least for an advisor,
Mm.
I don't think you set out with the intent of creating your brand. I think for an advisor or even a smaller firm, your
Mhm.
brand it is who you are. And I think
Yeah.
your brand is really just your reputation. And
Mm.
as you go out and you share your story, you let people know what you're about, your interests, as you keep on telling that story consistently, then that ultimately becomes your brand. I don't think you set out to say, all right, I need to have a personal brand and I want my personal brand to be X.
Mhm.
Maybe you can do that, but I think it's less genuine. And I'm a big believer in doing things for the
Yeah.
right reasons and being genuine and authentic. If you just go out and you put yourself out there, your beliefs as an advisor, the interests, you keep on doing that and show you're an expert, but have a little personality to it, then before long, you're going to have this brand. And then you're going to be able to take a step back or have someone like yourself take a step back and say, okay, here's the brand message that you're putting out there. Is that really what you want it to be? And if so, then keep doing what you're doing. And if not, then maybe we need to make some tweaks to things. But I don't think you set out with, okay, here's my just do it phrase and my Nike swoosh.
Mhm.
Like, I think anything like that might come later on.
And I think that's a really good point because I think there are a lot of brands out there. There's something that they want to be, but in fact, in this marketplace, what I'm seeing, your best bet is to be authentic. And I think there's a lot of people out there who still aren't getting that, and they want to be like someone else that they admire, not realizing that their strength is actually everything about them that makes them different from that competitor or that other brand that they look up to. Because you're going to be strongest when you are authentic. And really, it is about doing some internal work and really simmering down what is it exactly, what is your essence, not what you want it to be, what is it exactly. Obviously if there's some things you want to tweak in there, okay, but really your strength is going to come from your authenticity and speaking to something that really lights you up. And it's hard to do that when you're trying to be someone you're not. All of us can probably remember a time in our life, social situations, high school, whatever it was, where you were trying to be something you weren't. It was harder. You didn't hit your flow. Usually you hit that flow when you're really being authentic. So I think you nailed it. Authenticity is a huge
And
part.
it's not just in high school. When I first,
I know.
I put myself out there. Like, I'm an open book. When I
Yeah.
first started the firm and had my blog, Josh Brown is one of the guys I looked up to over at Real Holtz Wealth
Mhm.
Management. And that is, everybody knows that. Like, he's one of my mentors. I love the guy. And I wanted to write like he did. I wanted
Mhm.
to be entertaining. I wanted to be funny. I wanted to be analytical. I wanted to basically recreate what he did. And
Yeah.
not that I tried to write like him, but I kind of had that as that's the way I wanted to be. And I tried that and it was a struggle.
Mhm.
Then finally realized, you know what? Like, he's doing his thing. I can't recreate that. I shouldn't recreate that. Let me just write about the things that I want to write about. And it ended up being more, I always say philosophical, but like my best blog post, my best content is not super analytical. It's more
Mhm.
to get you to think about values and what's most important and then bring in the finance component to it.
It's the
And once
soul
I
stuff.
figured, yeah, once
Yeah.
exactly. And once I figured that out, then the
Mm.
content game became so much easier. I hit that flow, as you referenced.
You hit the
It became
flow.
so much easier. So it's not just back in high school. It's, we see that people are creating content and we see that it's working and it's fun. And it's a good way to grow your business. But when you're first getting started, you haven't found your voice. So you
Mhm.
try to take from those leaders that you see and you identify with to try to emulate them and yourself. And maybe that's a good way to start, but you're exactly right. When you are authentic and you figure out who you are and how you want to communicate, then that becomes a lot easier to get that out there. And maybe that's a good segue into that becoming the brand narrative. So we talked about brand. What's the brand narrative?
So the narrative is your story. So brand is what you want people to feel, when they see your name, when they think about you, when they see your content. The narrative is going to be how you get there, how you get them to actually think of you in those ways. So this is an important step and something I think everyone can kind of take away from today. If you don't have your brand narrative figured out, please spend some time this weekend and just think about it if you want to do better on social. And it's going to be your why. It's going to be, why you got into the work that you do. what is it that really drives you here? It's going to be your core values. What are the things that you're standing on? Why did you leave that big firm? If you're a small, if you're an RIA, you left. Why did you leave? Who are you serving? And how? What is your path? What got you to where you are today? Those are kind of that's to me, that's the essence of your brand story. And basically those are going to be their own little points. And you're going to create content ultimately that speaks to some of those points that people can get to know you. This is all about being more personable. People, like you were saying, Justin, that people can, a lot of people are going to feel when you're not being authentic. They also are going to feel when they realize they don't really know that much about you. It's harder to connect if you're distrustful of someone. We talk a lot about brand trust in social media. Social media, one of the most powerful things that it's useful for is building that brand trust in a more authentic way. It's just sharing more about who you are. And that to me that's the brand narrative.
One of the ways to tell the narrative, you said it's who you are. I think that should be anybody's first post.
Yeah.
If you're going to start, or even if you want to do a podcast, just write out all those things that you mentioned. Why'd you leave? What are your core values? What do you stand for? All those things, and just bullet point and just address each one of those and put that out as your first post. And then you can always circle back and elaborate more on them. But I agree. And when I talk to advisors and, kind of work on their brand strategy and their content strategy, those are the first questions I want to know. And then let's figure out how do we convey that to build this brand narrative, which the cool thing is I kind of fell into helping advisors doing it just because I enjoy it so much.
Awesome.
But a lot of what a lot of what you're talking about as the expert is kind of just what was intuitive to me of here's how we need to convey that story. So it gives me confidence that I'm heading in the right direction.
You're doing it great.
The right way. You mentioned earlier niching down. And I think now is a good point to kind of bring in the conversation about niches or niches, depending on how you want to say it. Somebody joked with me after the last one. I always say niche.
I do too. I know. I'm owning it. So, we're saying niche.
in the advisor world, it's becoming more and more of a focus for advisors, especially smaller advisors, or as advisors look at their own practice, the clients they work with, because if you can become an expert in one area, you're more referable, it's easier to relate, and you can show yourself as an expert, but it's also a lot easier on the content game. And for the first 4.5 years of my career at my own firm, I kind of wanted to be the guy who was successful without having a niche. And I shared this on a recent podcast that part of the reason was I hadn't found my group yet. Like I hadn't found who I wanted to go all in on. And now I have. And I rebranded the website, the messaging's there. And I'll share something with you and kind of get your feedback of what you think. I have a kind of a unique goal for the brand of RLS Wealth that I'll share with you in a second. But so now I have the niche. So you in our call mentioned niche a number of times. You've mentioned already a bunch of times. How does the niche and having one play into the brand narrative and the success that people can have with their branding and their content marketing?
For sure. So this comes back to the point of authenticity and also content creation. If you're thinking about social media and you're thinking about what to post, and on a regular basis, you're like, I don't know what to post. There are a million topics I could be talking about. There's one of your problems. Really niching down, especially, as a small as an advisor, if that's one of your strengths, is to hone in on a specific community and speak directly to them, because your messaging is going to be stronger. You're going to be able to be more consistent. And this is it. You're going to gain a really loyal following. The people who do find you will have been looking for you, and you'll be able to speak directly to them. So it's all about making that connection. And if you're trying to connect with, hundreds of thousands of people, all at once, usually you end up forming really weak connections with a bunch of people. Whereas if you can really focus in on a portion of that group, you're going to form deep connections, lasting connections with a smaller group of them. But ultimately, you're going to end up having that business because they're going to be able to connect with you, faster. They're going to be able to build that trust faster, have more of a conversation with you, and be more engaged. So it's a great strategy. And also it makes content creation way easier. So if you're freaking out about content, you still don't get it, you're wondering, you probably have to narrow that focus down a bit.
Well, it gives you quality over quantity as far as the relationships with people before they even become clients.
Yes.
To your point, you're developing more of a relationship because they're reading your stuff more often. You're speaking their language and just build that trust. And at the end of the day, we want those quality touches, not a bunch of touches. I mean,
Yes.
a numbers game is one way to do it, but I think it's a lot harder to do than just go in. And I think that's important for people who are listening or watching, that as you go through this, because we're going to get to how do we tell our story and go into kind of the
Mhm.
social media side of things,
Mhm.
not to get hung up on the analytics as how many, blog posts have you, or how many reads have you had? How many likes do you get? How many downloads of your podcast? Like, maybe keep an eye on that from time to time to see if it's trending in the right direction, that it's resonating with
Mhm.
people, but
Mhm.
don't compare yourself to other podcasts and the number of downloads they have, because that's not your goal. At least it shouldn't be, to compete with
Mhm.
podcasts. It's to reach the right people. And if you have 100 loyal listeners, that's better than a
That's
thousand
amazing.
listeners that aren't engaged. So
Yes.
don't get hung up on how many downloads and reads you have. Focus more on developing those quality relationships.
And
Um,
also, Justin, I really think it's okay to have a process. It's,
mhm,
depending on your business goals, but I really believe that if you're still not sure, and you're still kind of feeling it out, I think that's okay. That process is okay, as long as you're starting to ask yourself, what exactly do I represent? Who do I want to speak to? What do I stand for? I think you're gonna find your way to your niche. There's no need to be so forceful with it. But first, just having that understanding that, wow, I've never thought about a brand narrative, and starting there was
mhm.
going to help you. But sometimes it takes time to find that group and find your message.
I also think it depends on the personality.
Yeah.
So me going off of feeling, and you keep on calling me the soul man, I kind of like that. But on like soul, like I can't force the niche. And I've given this example before on another podcast. I forget which one, but so Eli Lilly's corporate global headquarters is in downtown Indianapolis. Thousands of employees, they all do real well. It's medical sales, they have a 401k, all these things I could learn, and I could be the Eli Lilly advisor for pick a demographic,
Hmm.
but that doesn't excite me. And for me, I have to be excited.
Yeah,
And
me
for
too.
some people, it's just more, but for other people that like that, they're not wired that way. They
Mhm.
just need the bodies. They need the audience, and then getting into that groove of numbers and everything. That's all they need. And that's okay. So I always try to present all the options that are out there. For some people, it is a feeling. You have to be excited about who you're working with and what you're doing. And for other people, it's just they're like, they go into mode and they're working. It's not so much the need for that excitement. They just want to have clients to help. They want to run the numbers. They want to do good
Mhm.
work. Who they're doing for doesn't matter. A plan is a plan. For me, it's more about the excitement, being around people, which is why the new direction of the firm for future clients is more creative people who I will vibe with, that will get me excited and keep our firm excited, and not kind of fall into a plateau of being an advisor, because that's not what I want. I want to be challenged. I want to be excited. I want to help
Mhm.
people who are building things and have bigger aspirations. I want to be surrounded by those people. So why not build the future of the firm around those people as well?
And Justin, you touched on something. I think it is important to note that there are different kinds of people. Some people are like, I don't need that excitement. Tell me who the clients are that I can serve, and where I can find them, and that's more what I want my content strategy to be about. And I'll just say that this strategy, a content strategy, brand strategy, that works regardless of if you're looking for excitement or you're just looking for the clients. You don't necessarily need that. This is how you find a loyal following, and it will drive your business. So it works for you regardless of if you need that excitement. It is ultimately going to be a numbers game. It's going to take time, but this is where you start really honing in on that and standing out on social.
So I'll share my goal with you, and that'll take us
Okay, yeah,
into
let's
like the
hear about
brand
it.
story and the brand guide.
Hmm.
Before I do that, don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, I've got the chat open. If you have questions for Ninamarie or you want to chime in, throw them in
Yes.
there, and we'll work them in where they're appropriate. But I never had this idea until I worked with my web guy who did the design work for the new website. And as we're going through the process of kind of talking about the vision and the messaging and
Mhm.
all of that, he asked me if I wanted RLS to be a lifestyle brand. And
Mm.
at first I thought back, I was like, no, that's weird. But then I paused for a moment, and I don't think I've publicly shared this before. I've told some friends, but then my reaction was immediately yes. I
Mm.
want the work that we do to be so meaningful for our clients, and that the clients that we're working with are people who are chasing dreams, living non-traditional lives, doing what they want to do, writing their own story, that ultimately the little dotted circle that's a part of the new logo will it'll stand for that as you wear one of our hats, shirt, whatever it might be, that eventually that logo means I write my own story. I'm living my purpose. I'm
Love
living
it.
life the way I want to live. So I share that because one, that puts pressure on me to make that happen. Like for me, I think part of making that a part of RLS Wealth is the storytelling that we do about who we help, and then delivering on that. Like you can't just tell the story and then not help your clients do those things. So
Yes.
telling the story to get those clients in, doing good work for them, helping them reach their goals, live the lives that they want to live, so that they really are living what we say we're helping them live. And then that's when that brand, I think, becomes a lifestyle brand. And if you're walking down the street and you see somebody with that shirt on, if you're not living your best life, you're kind of jealous because you know that person is. Like that's where I want to take it through. And that, to
It's
me,
smart. You're
that's
creating a tribe. You're
right.
creating, it's the
Exactly.
tribe effect.
Right, exactly. And
People
so
are
to
going to want to be a
me,
part of that.
exactly. To me, that's an exciting challenge
Mhm.
because one, you have to tell the story. Two, you have to do the planning work and take good care of your clients. And then three, you have to elevate that logo, that messaging to that next level to where people are
Mhm.
aware of it and they know what it stands for. And at the same time, there will be people that will see that logo and be like, those people are crazy. Why would they give up a 40-hour a week job, making good money with good benefits to go do these crazy things?
Right.
That's not for me. So
Yeah,
it
right.
will do both. So hopefully maybe like in a year or two, we can touch base on it and see if I have this lifestyle brand that's
I
been built
love
for
it.
clients. But I think it'd be kind of fun. And I think that whether it's a lifestyle brand or maybe the better term is tribe, that advisors should try to create this, brand narrative that creates a tribe of their clients. It's kind of like what Desarte and I talked about last week of creating community for your clients.
Yes, it
Then
is.
the next step is you combine your brand with that community, and now you have a tribe. So maybe we're figuring something out on these advisor
We definitely
podcasts
are.
back to
And I
back.
think it happens organically. Like you're
Mhm.
seeing, that was kind of like you just said, it was the next step of brand. Ultimately, if you really embody your brand that you believe in, and if your brand has a lot of elements to it that are about, ultimately it is about lifestyle. It's about what you believe in, and that
Mhm.
touches so many aspects of your life. That next level is going to be, organically, it's going to be about community. The people who are attracted to you will have, similar interests, and ultimately you'll have a whole group of people that kind of vibe, if you will, with the same, in the same way. So I think it's really smart, and I think that's where we're going. And also, I will say that brands that do really well on social, they usually have that social component. How are you helping to uplift people beyond, kind of the immediate nature of your service or your work? People want to
Mhm.
know. People want to feel good about you as a human, and kind of what are you doing for our communities? That really resonates always. That's always a strong point. So if you don't have that yet, you should think about it.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's
So
coming.
that'll help feed it. So you mentioned on your website having a brand story and a guide. Like that's step one. If you're
Yes.
working with somebody on developing their brand and their brand narrative, what's the brand story versus brand narrative, and then what's the guide?
hmm So the guide, so this is really important because the reason that I go there with clients first is I want to figure out, usually and oftentimes, whether they're creating content or whether I'm creating content for them, they know their story better than I do. I'm coming in as an outsider. So we start kind of the consultation, we start the relationship with, tell me about, we have to figure out together what is their brand story, like we talked about. But the guide is going to get down to nitty gritty. So I really want to know specifics. Now, when you talk about brand story, okay, those are your core values, that's your why. When we're talking about guide, I'm talking about, what is your brand voice? What is your visual design? When people see posts, how are they going to recognize that it's you? It's going to be, down to like verbiage that you use, down to the types of photos that you use. It's really going to be how you communicate your brand story on social specific to content. So that when you go to make a post, you have a guide. Oh, here are the words I use. Here's the target audience that I'm speaking to. Here are the photos that I use. Here are the colors that I'm using when I'm, thinking about coming up with posts. It's going to be about that consistency piece. And it's important that you have this guide so that when you can create content, you're going to continuously have a consistent theme going. Because one thing I see a lot of folks struggle with is that consistency, and the consistency of your brand message is almost as important as the message itself. Because if people see you out there making a strong statement, but you're not making it all the time, you're back and forth, you're all over the place, it's hard for people to really latch on and know that you're authentic. Because you seem like you're all over the place, and you are. So it's really going to be about consistency moving forward with content.
And we talk about consistency a lot in
Mm.
content about frequency and where you're posting, but I do think there's a lot of value to the consistency of the brand image. So anybody getting started, listen to Ninamarie, and because she's right. And I found this out the hard way. So,
Mm.
like, one of the reasons I love doing this stuff is because I've tried so many different things. I enjoy trying to figure it all out, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. Now, luckily, those
Love
mistakes
it.
haven't really cost me anything, but let me help speed up people's running or their runway, get it a lot shorter so they can get up there quicker.
Mm.
My first so when I launched the firm, it was RL Wealth Management because we had Roman and Leo. Didn't have Silas yet. Silas was born, then I rebranded to RLS Wealth Management and got a new logo. My first two logos I had done on Fiverr. I didn't spend a lot of money. They weren't bad, but they were okay. But there was no brand guide that went with them.
Hmm.
And then when I decided to redo the website, I wanted to get a new logo as well. I wanted to have a logo that I always say is sleek, but I think of like Tesla and Apple, like kind of minimal, modern,
Yeah.
maybe techie. Like that's the image I wanted. So I actually worked with a developer or a designer to help me design this, and she put together a brand guide. And when I
Hmm.
saw that, it made total sense. So I
Hmm.
have this 7 or 8 page document that shows the logo, how to use it, what not to do with it, what it means, what it stands for, why the colors, the exact color coding so you can match everything, so that now everything that I give a client or someone might receive has the exact same orange. It has the exact
Hmm.
same blue. The circles are the same. Like everything is the same. So there's consistency. And it's one of those little things that if you don't have that, you probably don't appreciate it. But once
Hmm.
you start to piece these things together, it just makes everything look more professional and makes you
Hmm.
look like you're on top of your game. And
Yeah,
maybe clients don't notice it right out the gate, but I'm willing to bet there's something in our subconscious that picks up on how all
absolutely.
these things flow together. So don't wait to get that brand guide. Do that earlier. We had somebody come talk to the AGC about the hero's journey, and
Mm.
she did copy and things for advisors. And she always, when I was talking to her, she told me that you should actually do your copy before you do your website. And then that way
Mm.
you can take your copy to your developer and it will fit to the development properly rather than trying to squeeze the copy
Mm.
in a format that it may not fit.
Mm.
So again, there's different ways to do things, but if you think about doing your copy before your website, that's a little bit of a different approach. I think a lot of us go straight to the image and what we want to
Mhm.
see, but the words are probably more important than the images. So do the words first, which I would say is kind of more your brand story and
Yeah.
falls in line with the brand guide, and then put that on the website so that the website can be built around that copy.
I think you're spot on in terms of it's an aesthetic, and like you said, it is going to be subconscious when people. But we are beings that when we're seeing things, we're receiving all kinds of micro messages all the time. So the more consistency you have is going to be the difference between your success, and your downfall. And I think it's really your aesthetic is just speaking to those important aspects of your story, of your soul, of your brand, if you will, and it shouldn't be the other way around. Your aesthetic should speak to what you're all about. And so, and yet, like you said, and honestly, when people are talking about that they're struggling with their marketing, these things, though they might feel tedious to create, on the front end, these things save you so much time in the long run, and they make your content more successful. They make you more successful. So important steps for sure.
So what does the process look like of building out your brand story and the guide? What, like, on a high level, what does that look like? So probably going through the questions you mentioned earlier, but then
Mhm.
what do the iterations look like, and how do you know once you found that guide and you found that story?
Yeah, so really, I like to take people through a questionnaire, and it touches on language, touches on aesthetic, it touches on feel. If your brand were a person and it were in a room, what would the vibe be? If who is your brand to your customer? Is it a good neighbor? Is it a friend? It has a there's a number there are a number of questions that you can ask, but basically after you answer those questions and you have that kind of internal reflection, it's really going to be about coming up with a content plan. And it's going to be about that content plan representing the brand that you've just boiled down into all the bits and pieces that make it up. And that content plan is going to be a lot about sharing information, sharing your expertise, but it's also going to be about sharing that expertise in a way that always relates back to that content guide, to that brand guide that you've developed. So when you do share, when you do share a post, you're using specific verbiage that is aligned with your brand. You're creating images. You're using graphic design that is speaking to the aesthetic that you already outlined is important to representing what you're all about. So yeah, it's a questionnaire, it's an internal reflection, then it's going to be content strategy and content schedule and thinking about what your topics are that speak to who you want to speak to and what you have to say.
So getting into the delivery of all of this now, we're
Mhm.
progressing our way through this process. Content marketing and social media can be overwhelming.
Yes,
Where do you post? How often do you post? How should you be posting? What type of content? What is
definitely.
your advice for people who are just coming into this and wanting to get started to figuring that whole game out? What is your advice for them?
My advice, let's see. First, we already talked about it, but I'm going to continue preaching because it's so important. Really sit down and think about your brand story, your brand narrative. Even if you can't come up with a guide yourself, at least come up with your why you're doing what you're doing. Who do you want to speak to? And it doesn't, if you're not ready to niche down yet, that's okay. If you're not ready to niche down yet, come up with your, top three target audience that you want to speak to, and then come up with topics that you can really speak on that will help communicate your expertise. After that, one of my big things that I like to tell people to do right off the bat, find, 3 to 4 people in your industry, direct competitors, or, mostly direct competitors, and maybe a brand that just you really resonate with, that always makes you feel good when you see them, or, elicits some kind of strong response in you that is positive, and start tracking all of those people and brands. Start really analyzing their content, go through it, and just say, like you were saying, you had role models basically that you were looking up to, brand role
Mhm.
models, business role models. Track those brands and actually start to pay attention. What kind of content are they sharing? How often are they posting? And just start kind of making notes for yourself. What you're going to do is not mimic them, but you're going to be picking apart. This is what I really like about what they post. This is how they make me feel. Why do they make me feel that these are things that they do that I like? Oh, here are all the platforms that they're on. And that's going to be kind of your starting place if you're going to do this, on your own, to thinking about how can you improve your content strategy. Start watching.
I think another thing to consider when you're thinking of what platforms to be on,
Mhm.
ultimately we want to learn from those who are doing very well, but we also think about who are we trying to reach and
Yes.
picking the platforms that they're going to be on as well. So knowing where are your potential clients hanging out, and
Yes.
then that's definitely one of the places you want to put it as well. I also think that part of what your end goal, going back to your why, there are some advisors that want to not only grow their business but position themselves as experts, or I
Mm.
hate thought leaders, but whatever the non-arrogant thought leader term is, but somebody that's in the profession that can be looked to, like that would also determine where you're putting content as well. So your
Yeah.
content can do a couple things. It can help your clients grow, but if you want to establish yourself in the profession as somebody to look to as a leader in the future, then that also plays in there as well. I don't think there's a right answer
Absolutely.
of where you need to be putting your content. It's dependent upon where your audience is.
Exactly. And after that, as many places as you feel you can handle and be consistent in posting to, but it really is about where are the people that you want to speak to? You should be there. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about sharing across multiple platforms using like one app? So I have an opinion. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is the lead up to this blog post, the words introducing it are the exact same on Twitter as they are on LinkedIn and on Facebook and on Instagram. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Content needs to be tailored. I really believe in this. Now, if you are creating content that is going to be easily tailored to each platform, now it might make sense where you have certain campaigns, and I do this a lot, where you have certain campaigns, they do have this, a similar or the same visual component, but you have to realize that every platform has a different personality. It has a different community, basically codes and ethics and way to communicate. And you need to make sure that whatever content you're creating there feels native, as we say, native to the platform. So you want to be talking the talk of everybody in that room. You don't want to come in and seem like a complete outsider, or have your images not be formatted to the platform, because it immediately writes you off as someone who honestly who isn't as legitimate as people whose content shows up really well and that really blends into the platform you're in. So I think it's important when you're going to be on platforms, just do a quick Google search, do a little research on what are kind of the ethics, if you will, of those not the ethics, but really what are the ways of communicating on those different platforms, and make sure that your content is tailored to each platform individually. That's how I feel. And you're going to maybe use tools to make it easier for you, but your content better be tailored to your platforms.
And that's why you're the professional. I agree. But my agreement is sometimes people will follow you on Twitter and they'll follow you on LinkedIn. And I
Yeah.
don't want them seeing the same thing, saying, oh, he's just lazy and posted the same thing. Even if it's basically the same, I'm saying the same thing. I want to
Yeah.
use different words so you can tell that I took a couple of minutes and put thought behind this before I hit share. And I don't know why that matters in my mind, but to me it does. So, but I also think that as I go through and change the words up, there is a little bit of change in tone. Like Twitter's going to be
Yes.
more fun and more
Yep. More
joking, and LinkedIn's
casual.
going to be
Hmm.
a little bit more professional. But although I
Hmm.
try to make LinkedIn not so professional, so I kind of want to be the outsider that shakes it up a little bit because it is so dry and boring. But there is some thought behind it to where I'm posting it. I just never really thought about it before. I just didn't want to have the same thing across all the platforms and someone think I'm lazy.
One thing to think about that, and this is a common misconception, but remember that the odds of someone seeing your content on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, the odds are actually unlikely because of the algorithm, because of how everything goes, because of the mass number of pieces of content. People usually it's you almost want to make sure you have a lot of the same messages on all your platforms so that people get the information. But one way that I will suggest kind of making it obvious that you do care and take time to tailor your content to each platform, and so that people follow you on Twitter because they know they're going to get, something different in terms of the aspect of your personality, is do come up with a couple pieces of content a week that are a little different.
Mhm.
You're going to tweet differently. You're going to have a couple extra tweets. You're going to do something different on Twitter. You're going to make a different kind of post on Instagram just once in a while to make, just to give people that extra kind of unique value.
That's a great recommendation as well. If you have something that you want to make a little bit more special, and the thing
Mhm.
that comes to my mind is like a newsletter.
Mm,
So, like I have the newsletter advisor of tomorrow newsletter that
mm.
it's a little bit of curation, but I'm writing something new every week that is my own thoughts. But the only place that will be on the newsletter. So I want to kind of create this exclusivity to the newsletter that if you value things I have to say and you want to know what I'm thinking about, the
Mhm.
only way you're going to get that piece is going to be there. I'm still going to write on the blog. I'm still going to write on All About Your Benjamins. I'm still going to be out there, but maybe some more of my more personal thoughts or something that might be more valuable rather than more general is only going to be in the newsletter. And the newsletter is free, but I'm going to put it only in there to make that newsletter different from everything else. So you're following everywhere, but then you also want to subscribe to my newsletter because you don't want to miss out on something unique I might do just for those subscribers.
Absolutely. I think it's smart. Creating exclusivity, giving people an incentive to come and sign up and get more from you. I love it. It's great.
And while I bring up newsletters, don't sleep on newsletters.
Don't sleep.
I never had one in the past. Like my All About Your Benjamins newsletter is just my RSS feed that MailChimp sends out every Sunday. It's lazy. But I never really thought email was that valuable because I hate emails. But what
Mm,
I'm finding is I get way more engagement from the newsletter than I do from any other piece of content. That
that's
there's
amazing.
actually conversations that go back and forth
Mm,
via email because of my newsletter. And then I didn't think of this. I forget who I heard say it, but that getting into somebody's inbox that they voluntarily join your newsletter
it's
is
huge.
it's very intimate, and they're
Hmm.
letting you into a private space that
Yes.
not everybody is wanted in, and they chose for you to come in. So that
Yes.
is developing a deeper relationship before. So it's almost like my thought almost is use the blog and use social media to drive people to the newsletter, which I'm going to try and recreate on RLS Wealth side for the future growth. So
Mhm.
we're going to do more of a true newsletter for RLS Wealth to try to get people on that newsletter as well. And then from there, there's lots of things you can do with campaigns and things of that sort. I haven't even got to that level yet, but don't
Just
sleep on newsletters. They are way more valuable than I ever thought they were.
absolutely. And that brings up a good point, is that you don't necessarily know what's going to resonate with your audience until you start doing it. So once you come up with kind of a content plan and you're actually going to be devoting more time and more resources to your content marketing, the next piece that's really important that I really want people to get is you need to be paying attention to numbers. And basically you're testing your market. What speaks to your audience? It might surprise you. If it's email messaging, if you're noticing that you have a way higher engagement rate on email, start doing more of that and making sure that you beef that you give more to that content over time to really nurture that. And just whatever you're seeing people are resonating with, do more of that. So you're going to be tailoring your strategy and kind of honing in on what your audience wants a little bit over time.
Don't fall in love with one form of content, and
Do
also
not.
avoid the sunk cost fallacy, because I look at All About Your Benjamins, the podcast, which is my very
Mhm.
first podcast. So it's one of my first big pieces of content. It's kind of like my baby. It has good
Mm.
history, but I haven't done much with it lately. And if I was going to follow your advice, I probably should just shut that down and not do it. I'm stubborn. I want to bring it back, but um, if I was advising another advisor, I would tell them, do as I say, not as I do. Shut that thing down. Go focus your efforts on a newsletter or the other things that are working.
Yeah.
But part of what I want to bring to the table is trying all these things, and not just testing it for myself, but testing it for other advisors to say, hey, here's
Mhm.
things that works, here's things that don't work. Don't spend your time doing that. Or so it's kind of it's dual purpose for me. But yeah, but part of it is I've fallen in love with the idea of having a podcast. I don't want to give it up. And that's probably not the best use of time sometimes.
You know what? We're all going to make those choices. And
Right.
especially if that's something that's important to you, I think go for it. But especially a lot of my clients, they say, I'm so overwhelmed by social media. Just thinking about it, I get overwhelmed. That's where I come in. But I really feel like social media, I really believe in efficiency and also simmering down. There's all this chaos around it, but once you start to do it, you start to see these patterns. And I think once you can start making the most of those patterns and capitalizing on it, and narrowing down what you do and what you say, and you start getting a flow. I really am big on flow, but you've narrowed it down. You're not everywhere. You're a select few places where your messaging is strong. That's where you're really going to start to see that momentum, because you've tailored everything and you can manage the content and the platforms that you're signed up for. So it depends
One
on the individual.
one final thought on social media
Hmm.
before we get to kind of some actionable things for advisors to maybe
Yeah.
take away from today. I think there's a lot they can take away, but it's things they can actually go try to do. What about, so we talk about social media, and maybe it's just me that's just thinking about posting and sharing my content,
Yeah.
but engaging with other people on social media is very important as
Yes.
well. You
Yes.
can't just use it to display all of your stuff and look at how great I am. You've
Right.
got to spend time engaging with other people. And what I have found is very beneficial is not only sharing your content, but you mentioned uplifting others, like highlighting other people and sharing other people's content. And whether it's just shining light on them or adding to it, but don't just think of social media as here's where I'm going to send all of my stuff. You've got to invest time and be engaging and having conversations with people respectfully. Like, you have to go into it not being a jerk, but just
Yeah.
go out there and engage with people, and don't miss that opportunity to have conversations, because that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
Courtney McQuaid is somebody I met on Twitter because of engaging.
Courtney.
Her and
Yes.
I had a conversation, and now she said, hey, you need to meet Ninamarie. And here we are, we're doing a
It's so
podcast,
amazing.
all because of engaging.
Yeah.
If all I ever did was put my blog posts and podcasts and videos and then left and never did anything, we would not be talking today. I would not know Courtney. My network of peers would not be what it is today. But because I spent time there engaged, it has helped me massively from becoming a better advisor, learning more, knowing who to go to when I have
Yes.
questions, and then building friends as well. So you can take all of that I've done with other advisors, and you can still do that with your potential clients on whatever platform it is. But my
Yes.
my word of advice when it comes to engaging is we've said it before, but be genuine with the comments. Don't just comment to say that you're active on social media.
Don't be
Don't
spammy. No,
Right,
nobody likes
right,
just a like or a smiley face. No,
right. Or
bring value.
yeah, I agree. Like
Yeah, no.
I think if you're just going to say I agree, that's when you do the like.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you have
Don't
something
even
to
write
add
back.
to it,
Mhm.
yeah, if you have something to add to it, then that's when you start to have these conversations. You start to
Yeah,
meet people, and then things kind of go. So that was the final thing I wanted to put on social media. I didn't want people to think that the only role social media has is distribution.
yeah,
Distribution is a part of it, but you need to be out there engaging, bringing value to whatever platform you're on and whatever audience you have. You've got to try to make their lives better and bring value to them. It's Gary
yeah.
Vee talks about give, give, take. Like you need to be
Yes,
giving value, whether it's your
yes.
information or conversation or highlighting other people before you can ever expect to get anything out of it.
Absolutely. And people feel that when it's, people. So keep in mind, social media is a conversation. The conversation is moved online. So would you, just like in a normal conversation, how do you feel when there's someone in the group who's always just talking about themselves? You hate them. So
Right.
make sure that you are not that person on social. And in fact, not like you said, not so it's important to, I like to think of social media, the whole strategy. I like to kind of think of it in kind of two layers to start with. It's that content strategy. What is your message? What are you about? And how do you communicate that with the posts you make? The immediate next strategy next part of the strategy that's so important is engagement. And there is a method to it, but ultimately it gets simmered down to go out there and communicate with people and bring that value, like you said. Be smart in your communications, go and network with people in your field, but also go out to think about the things that your prospective clients are talking about and go get involved in those conversations and be genuine and don't be salesy. Don't promote yourself. Basically, anywhere you can, share a little bit of your expertise and be dropping insight wherever you can, and people will come and find you. So that is already marketing for yourself. It's sharing interesting parts of the conversation, and ultimately people are going to want to learn more about you if your messaging is good.
So what are common mistakes you see people making that are easily avoidable?
Easily avoidable: posting and not engaging with others. So like you said, it's a two-way conversation. Make sure that you're communicating, and also going and supporting others, like you said, and being an active part of the conversation, not just for your own gain. um, Another thing that I see is people being too rigid on social media. Social media is about fun, and I know some people have a hard time with that. I just want to say that it's not marketing from the past. I mean, it is in some ways. It's word of mouth marketing. Basically, it's moved online. It's a conversation, but social media gives you a chance to have lots of fun. Whether that's lightening up a little, sharing more personal posts, posting a meme now and then, communicating in a way that is more social media friendly, being a little lighter. I think that I see that a lot, especially around people coming from the corporate side of things who really struggle to tap into that fun messaging. Like we talked about, they kind of have like a business face and then a real person face.
Mhm.
Merge that for social media. You want your business face and your real person face to come out strong.
All right. So, one or two actionable items that people could take away from today, whether that be a book, a resource, something to go out and do. I mean, you've given them a lot of things to do as far as the checklist and the questions.
Yeah.
And if I have the time, I'll try to go back and pick out those questions real quick and put those in the show notes just to make it easier to find when you go back and listen to. But what's a couple things or resources that people could take away from for today?
Well, I will say that it's important to know what people are talking about. I really love using Google Trends to go and find out what's trending in terms of search. Basically, the stuff the content, the posts that you make, you just want to be communicating to a conversation that people find interesting. So I like to go there and kind of see what people are talking about and see where I might be able to provide value and jump in on the conversation. Um, Another part of that, I really will come back to, if you're not sure where to start with your own content, or it's kind of all over the place, I really have to say that I would recommend, again, going and picking out 3 4 brands that you really resonate with, that you love, that you would want to emulate almost, and go and follow them and pick out what about their messaging, what about their content really gets you interested, and just start to pay attention in that way. So I would say those are two actionable points.
You saw me look behind me. I was trying to see if I had the book in
Yeah.
my office. It's at home. So the resource I was
Oh,
going to give,
mhm.
it's not anything that hasn't been talked about before, but the book by Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand, I think is
Mm,
a great starting point as
yeah.
well. I don't know if you've read that, but it basically walks you through a lot of what we talked about. And he's taken that book and turned it into, I don't know if there's a designation, but there's like a whole class and courses, and you can get certified in it. So it's basically telling a story, building your brand
Mhm.
around your story. So I'll link to that in the show notes over to Amazon, but that's a real good resource that I like that book a lot. I'm actually rereading it again, marketing it all up just to make sure that what I'm doing now going forward is in line with where I think it should be. So that's a real good book to read.
I love it.
All right. Any closing thoughts before we dive real quick into your music career?
Oh my goodness. Well, I just want to say that social media is an incredible tool, and using it effectively is not as hard as some people think. If you are intimidated by social media, I promise, if you start to do it and you start to apply some of these things, you might find that you have a lot of fun with it. And it's free marketing ultimately. And also, it's a great way to build community. So, no matter what you're doing, community building, this is where we're heading. Social media is in our future, it's here to stay. So, find some ways to have fun with it, would be my advice.
All right. So real quick, tell us about your music career.
Yeah. As Justin has mentioned, thank you for that lead in as well. I am a musician. I've always kind of thought of myself as a dueler. I like to say I love music. It's my soul. Obviously, I love marketing as well and kind of content and branding, but the music part is really my soul language, if you will. And it's me and my guitar. I am often, going and gigging at different places. I'm a traveling artist, and I just love it so much. So if you're interested, I mean, I would say my vibe is kind of indie neo soul. And yeah, I love sharing. If anyone wants to follow, I post little clips. I've been writing a lot of music this COVID-19 time. I've just had like a surge of creativity. So you will be seeing a lot more from me in terms of my own content, my own music. That's what I'm going to be focusing on in the next part of my musical journey.
Well, if you watch this on the replay, and I'm even going to have it on the podcast, the music at the very beginning was Ninamarie, and she's going to take us out as well. I've got it queued up
Oh
to
my
continue us
goodness.
on the way out. But I'll link to the YouTube channel, link to
Awesome.
Instagram. So we will find you on Instagram, both your personal for the music if people are interested in that, but also for the Content Ally,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, all those things. We'll get all those things there, because if this is a conversation that excites you but overwhelms you at the same time, A,
Mhm.
that's okay. And B,
Okay.
there are people like Ninamarie who can help you out. So I want to make sure that if you think that she can help you, you know how to find her. And obviously, I want to see her have success doing this, because I
Thank you.
agree that advisors should be doing this. And I know it doesn't come naturally to everybody. And there is the fear of putting yourself out there, the fear of being vulnerable. But I can promise you that being out there and being vulnerable and being yourself will far outweigh the fear that you're feeling. And once you start doing it, it gets a lot easier, and you'll start sharing more than you ever thought you would have, because you realize people aren't going to come at you, or if people do come at you, there are people that you don't care about anyway, and you just hit the mute button. You don't ever hear from them. So
And that.
I do think that this is the best way for advisors to grow. I think
Yeah.
big firms can do this and be
Yes.
successful, but especially for us, solo advisors, smaller firms, this I can't think of a better way to grow, if that's a part of your DNA, which is a part of mine, which is why I love it so much. So, Ninamarie,
Yes.
thank you very much for coming on and joining us and spending some time with us. Any final closing thoughts before I hit play and we listen to you on the way out?
Be authentic, as Justin said. And if you're not sure what that means, or you think, it's impossible because you have a corporate brand to uphold or a company brand to uphold, I will tell you it is possible, and people will resonate more with your message if you have more human to it. So get to it. Good luck. And remember that if you lean into the fear of it and you start trying it, it will get easier and you might have fun. Thanks,
All right, that's
Justin.
that's a great closing thought. Thank everybody for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube Live, thank you. The podcast will
Yes.
be up on Monday, so we can replay it there. You can get all the show notes over at justincastelli.io/blog. That's where that will be. All those things will live there, and we'll be back next Friday. We talked about niching down with Ninamarie. Chad Chubb is going to be joining us talking about how he developed his niche and the benefits he's seen from it. So the flow of this podcast continues on into niching with Chad Chubb, which will help build upon what
Love
we
it.
talked about today. So thank
It's
you
all about
everybody
flow.
for listening, and we'll have a
Thank you.
few moments of Ninamarie singing some Coldplay for us. So Ninamarie, thank you
Ah,
very much for joining. And if there's anything we can ever
Justin, thank
do,
you.
let me know and we will help you out.
Thank you for having me, Justin. Appreciate it. Bye, guys.